Welcome back, everyone. Welcoming back our chair, Kino Kamis. He is the Chief Strategy Officer at Double I and Head of Culture at UCT Online High School. And welcoming our panelists. Welcome, Kino.
Adam, thank you very much for that. And yeah, I mean, fulfillment. I mean, we come up with these wonderful names, right? What the hell does it actually mean? So how do I get my product to you in a manner which is very comfortable, timeless, and allows me to make money? I would imagine that's what it's all about. But we'll chat to the people who've immersed themselves into this particular space. I'll introduce you to our panel, but they'll be doing some introductions of their own. Santiago Rabellini is with RAM Hand-to-Hand Couriers, the Operations and Business Improvement Executive. Phil Marais from Cotton On, he's Head of Supply Chain for Africa and Brazil. And Johan van Tonda is the CRO at AWA Digital. And let's get right into it. Maybe Santiago, seeing as I threw your name out there first, tell us a little bit, because I think it's important for us to understand the people behind this particular discussion and your role as an operations and business improvement executive at RAM Hand-to-Hand Couriers. I'll hand over to you.
Well, thank you, Kino, for that flattering introduction. My role at RAM is actually quite simple. We are here to deliver a product to our customers on time and in full within a predefined time frame. And my background originally is one of a CA. I come originally from an accounting background. And over the years, through the data that we have been able to produce at RAM and through the various pieces of technology that we've deployed over the number of years, we've been able to extract a lot of value. So my role here is pretty much to coordinate across multiple disciplines, technology, people, operations, just to deliver the product, as you say, to the customer on time.
If you're anything like me, you ask them to explain some of the technology stuff to you like a 7-year-old, right? If you're anything like me. But thanks for that introduction, Santiago. Phil Marais, Cotton On's Head of Supply Chain, Africa and Brazil. How often do you spend time on the beaches of Brazil, Phil?
How sad is that, right? Been to Brazil a handful of times and never been to a beach. Yeah, so that's part of my portfolio. So I'm responsible for supply chain, Africa and Brazil. So that basically makes me responsible for product once it leaves our suppliers all around the world until it gets to our various customers. We're speaking today mostly about our online customers, but that's obviously across our bricks, wholesale and e-com channels.
Absolutely. Thanks for that, Phil. Now, Johan van Tonda, as I said, CRO at AWA. Is it AWA or AWA Digital? Help me out here.
Yeah, AWA Digital, but if AWA turns you on, then use that.
No. AWA hasn't turned me on for a long time. Now, I think we'll stick with AWA, shall we then? Johan, just let's talk about your role, because the digital space is a very interesting one. The digital space is where we can gain a lot of our insights, make a lot of our strategic decisions based on some of the information that we've gained. So let's talk a little bit about your role, AWA Digital, and how that interfaces with what we are discussing today, which is obviously fulfillment.
Yeah, that's an interesting one, because unlike the two fellow panelists, I'm not that deeply immersed in the logistics or the fulfillment side. So CRO, let's start there. CRO is conversion rate optimization. So, you know, I work with businesses, e-commerce businesses, to help them to sell more, make more money off their website. And that's using a lot of data. So I work a step or two before the product is handed over to, you know, to the couriers or the fulfillment people.
Okay, so I think, you know, something I said this morning when I opened, everything we do, and people talk about supply chain strategies, and I mean, there is no supply chain strategy. There's a business strategy and there's a corporate strategy, and we know that. And everything bows down to either the corporate or the business strategy if you're a business unit within a corporation. So let's talk a little bit about how your fulfillment execution actually lines up with your business strategy. Phil, so let's start with you from a Cotton On point of view.
So that's it, right? So we've spoken and we've got actually have people in the various parts of our supply chain on this panel. My focus area is to my customer, right? So we all have vendors within our process, that will deliver a service to a customer within their expectation. Now, Johan, you'll speak about what that customer expectation is and how that evolves and changes day to day, how we ourselves are setting the bar higher and higher ourselves, because no one wants a worse performance than what they've already got. And then how we impress our customer day in and day out is hand in hand with how we do it with our vendors. So if I fail in my last mile, whatever van he's driving, it's a non issue. And I've got to be responsible for my internal operations and then have the confidence and faith and reporting and structure in place that whatever vendor or touch points my customer has with any of the people who are attached with that cotton on order, that's on me and it's my customer. So I can't afford to lose that customer. And by choosing the right vendors, we really imprint on them or choose vendors based on very similar strategies. So they will align really nicely with us, because if their strategy is the same as ours, we're obviously monitoring and reporting and checking that they are, and that they are executing to that promise. And then I'm retaining and evolving my customer base into a bigger one, which is what we're all after.
Absolutely. But the bottom line is you're keeping the customer happy, because the customer off, they're going to go somewhere else, right? And I think that it's a big responsibility. In the morning
and last thing at night, absolutely.
Exactly. Santiago?
Well, it's an interesting question, because I think it depends on how one defines who the customer is. And us being, and I'd say this in inverted commas, being the wheels behind the supply chain, we often find ourselves, we actually have two customers. We don't have a single customer. We've got the sender who's sending the parcel, the one that generally pays the bills, and then we've got the customer being the recipient who is actually receiving the goods that have been purchased. And to keep both happy is sometimes very difficult. I mean, if we mess it up, you've got 2 emails, 2 phone calls from different angles, and you're having to deal with it. So from our point of view, we like to compartmentalize the strategies around how we interact with our customers. One is sender-faced, and I say that for to talk exactly to the Cotton Ons of the world, and then almost recipient-based, which is a more personal type of strategy that one adopts on a mobile handheld or some sort of communication, call centers, etc. So in our world, we've actually got multiple strategies to talk to the different customers.
So you got a headache for each side of your brain. Okay, I mean, I've
got to take a Panado and a district.
Now, Johan, I know you guys have done some really interesting research, because at the end of the day, and yes, Santiago's 100% right, depending on who you are, if you are the wheels, you have a myriad of stakeholders that you need to keep happy. But I just want to go back to the customer the way we understand it, right? Kino sitting in Sunningdale, in Cape Town or Johannesburg, whoever, Nkolo sitting in Port Adder, wherever, has ordered something. And there are certain things that put a smile on your face and certain things that don't. You guys have done some research into this. Give us some insight into what you believe customers want and what the passion killers are. Or there's another name you've got for it, Johan, I believe.
No, it is a passion killer, but I live in the world of data, in the world of customer data. So there's constant research being done, and it's it never stops. And it happens in South Africa, and it also happens in the UK, where our head office is. And there are certain common patterns, but it goes back to what Phil said earlier about their expectations. So and the samples that we're talking about here are significant. It's representative of, I would say, e-commerce in South Africa, certainly representative of the clients that we work with. And the biggest passion killer by far, so 20 years ago, when we started selling stuff online, was payment, and it was the trust and the anxiety around putting your credit card details into a computer. That's long gone. Few people worried about that. The passion killer today is delivery, and we consistently hear 3 things about delivery. The first one is, how much is it going to cost me? And if you're going to charge me to deliver something to me, that's already a big bucket of ice water all over the experience. There needs to be a really good reason for me to continue. The second thing is, how long will it take for that product to get to my door? And that's changing rapidly because, a couple of years ago, there wasn't really any expectation in South Africa, unless you've lived in the UK or the US where, you had same day delivery. Then Takealot got things up to a reasonably good standard. And right now, 60/60 is delivering groceries within an hour. And so that bar is consistently raising. And so the expectations that customers have when they buy from you are equally going up. And the third one is slightly related to delivery, but I'll put it in that category. And that's, is it going to be the right thing? Is it going to fit me? Is it going to be the right size? Can I trust you to actually deliver the right thing to my door? And if you've been bitten once or twice, then next time I'm probably not coming back to you. And actually it's worse than that, because next time I might go back to the store. I might give up on e-commerce altogether.
Absolutely. Now, Johan, just getting back to the data side of things, right? You're a data scientist. You deal with these things on a daily basis. Surely if we use that data correctly and we implement it correctly, and those are both big correctlies, we shouldn't be having some of the challenges that we have, or at least we shouldn't be having the magnitude of some of the challenges that we have. I mean, I could bore everybody with my Takealot experience, but I won't.
Yeah, and those are big caveats that you put out there, Kino. Having the data, and there's a lot of talk about big data, but knowing what to do with it, knowing how to process it, knowing how to read it. And then we haven't spoken about managing. So to give you a quick example in practice how this works. So what a lot of customers or e-commerce businesses in South Africa are doing is the so-called decentralized model, right? So the product that you're buying on the site, you don't know where it's coming from. You're buying it from the site, but actually it's being picked from a store close to you. So the assumption is that firstly, the individual store has kept their systems up to date. The second assumption is that the systems are talking correctly to each other, garbage in, garbage out. The third thing is that maybe they've only got one item in stock at that store. There's somebody in the queue about to buy that item, or it's just been returned. And so in the moment where you've bought it, it's changed. And so, that's where a lot of things fall through the cracks today still. And it's a big investment to get all of those things, the technology, the infrastructure, the management set up right. But there's a stat that I'll throw at you, which I think is important. McKinsey last year released a report on this, and they found that companies who are on top of this, who are digitally mature in the sense that they've got a grip on their analytics, the data side of things, outperform the rest by far. The margin is 68%. That's significant. Wow. 2/3 better. So there's your business case.
No, indeed. And I'm glad it came from McKinsey, not KPMG, because I wouldn't have believed you. But anyway, don't tell anybody I said that, right? Moving on very swiftly. You were talking about 60/60, Johan. I like that. It's one of my favorite delivery services. As a matter of fact, I started using them more prolifically when I had COVID. And I know it was quite a big leap for them, because initially what they did was they sandboxed everything and said, okay, we're going to test it in this area. And then all of a sudden COVID happened and bam, they had to deliver. And they've been I think they added something like 4 billion Rand to the ShopRite headline earnings per share or something like that. The clever people with the suits will be able to tell me more about that stuff, right? But I want to move on from 60/60 to Santiago's pizza delivery. Okay, not his own pizza delivery, but his analogy that he likes raising. And then we're going to juxtapose that with Phil's take on fulfillment as well. So Santiago, as you said earlier, you are the wheels. You've got more than one customer. But we obviously all had a bit of a chat before this. You did mention something I found fascinating, with the benchmark being 60/60, or in your case, the pizza company, the pizza delivery business. Tell us more about that. Take us.
So the way we talk about it internally, just so that it's a very simplistic model that people can understand, is if you think about the earliest form of e-commerce, it's back in the day, you used to pick up the phone, used to phone the pizza store around the corner. Within the hour, they arrive, they knock on your door, and they're delivering a pizza. They don't charge you for it. You pay for it after it's being delivered. If the cheese isn't right, you send it back. So it actually talks to all the points that Johan was raising earlier. It's the most simplistic delivery model. And today, I mean, everybody loves pizza, and everybody loves the fact that it's delivered within the hour. I don't think there's any people out there that actually don't like that delivery model. Now, what's interesting is on the wheel side of the world, if you think about it, over the years and over the 20 years that Johan speaks about, that we've been overcoming these barriers, one of them being the credit card, one of them, I mean, we've spent as an industry, we've spent billions and billions of rands in the infrastructure to try and to build these huge warehouses with these very robotic mechanisms and these very robust delivery models and networks and vehicles and aeroplanes. But at the end of the day, those models, that backbone, that infrastructure still cannot compete with a very simplistic mom and pop shop pizzeria around the corner. Now, there's a certain wisdom in that, and we speak about it often internally. There's a certain wisdom around that simplicity, that cost-effective delivery, where they don't even charge you for it. I mean, and the pizza costs what, 100 Rand, 150 Rand, depending if you like anchovies or not. But the point is that in the world of e-commerce, as it evolves and as it grows and as we move forward, we are seeing on the wheel side an ever-increasing need to decentralize almost the pick-pack process, because one thing that we physically cannot get away from, if I order something in Johannesburg and that item is in Cape Town, it has to travel 1,500 kilometers. There is nothing I can do. I cannot make the plane fly faster. I cannot teleport it. It physically needs to move into province. So the only way that one can actually get the product delivered quicker, faster, more efficiently is if the product is already close to the end consumer. That's the way we think about it. And exactly like Johan has spoken to it before, it's how do we use data, technology, the networks, the infrastructure that is already there to the best ability to try and enable and extract this pizzeria or pizza delivery type service for a range of goods, which is more than just mozzarella and, it's for all those things. So that's the model that we're seeing in the industry. That's the trend. That's how everybody is moving. And it is something we are actively pursuing and getting involved in. We feel it's the future. We call it the deliver it like a pizza.
I like that. I mean, we'll talk some more about the sort of stuff that you guys are doing to innovate around this, but I like the whole discussion around decentralization. Of course, not every business is equal. Different businesses have different imperatives, etc., and we'll get into that. But the whole issue around decentralization is bigger than just getting things closer to people. I mean, that's key if you're looking at fulfillment. But the discussions that have been had around decentralization is that the Bidvests of this world, as much as they deliver a great service, there are certain things that can be done in clustered communities around businesses. And that also speaks to job creation. It speaks to a much bigger narrative. And as much as it doesn't seem as if it's part of your core business thinking right now, as a matter of fact, if you decentralize and now you start using locals to move goods from A to B, you can monitor that, you can evaluate that delivery. It really opens up, I don't want to say another marketing avenue for the business, but an authentic story that a business can tell about how it also creates hyper-local jobs. Because I'm not obviously not everything can be decentralized, but where we can, I think it's important to do so. So Phil, let's chat about decentralization as such. I mean, it might or might not be something that would pertain to Cotton On, but I'd like to get your take on that.
And I can, like you said earlier, there are obviously trends that work, right? But that doesn't mean that every business gets painted with the same brush at that space and time. And so our journey has been where we have been we would have termed it fragmented. And we've consolidated our operations centrally. Now that may be in regional around the world or up in Joburg. And we've been able to then offer a better service to our individual customers by centralizing that and then partnering with a partner who's able to execute that last mile within the expectation of our customers. Now, you could quite rightfully say it'll be a lot cheaper and more efficient and faster to service out of my V&A store in Cape Town than pick it out of Joburg and send it on. It's still 1,600 Ks, or what is the number we said, Santiago? It's still 1,200 Ks, right? We're not going to change that, no amount of investment. But I've been able to ensure that I can get a more consistent service to my customer within their expectation, but in the centralized model. Now that's worked for us. We stick to our knitting and that we know what we're good at, so we'll stick to that. We're evaluating our NPS scores to make sure our customer feedback is still consistently that we're in the right place. Now, that doesn't mean that we can't evolve or we aren't looking for continuous improvement, whether it be speed of order processing or at what scale do we offer free express shipping, or when do we offer free shipping, or what price point it is. All of those things will change, and be agile enough to make sure we're exceeding or meeting our customer's expectation for buying his t-shirt or her t-shirts. I'm not buying bread that you've forgotten to buy because you need to make school lunches for tomorrow. So I don't need to sell that to you, right? But if a mom now doesn't actually have time to go to the mall because she wants to buy her kids clothes for summer or swim stuff going on holiday this weekend, rock and roll, I'm your site to find, right? And I can get it to you within your expectation and make sure I meet your need.
Okay, yeah, Johan, you're taking all of this, because I mean, if I was only to talk supply chain and fulfillment, then the two of us would sit here very quietly. But I'd like to, I would definitely love to get your take on this as a data person. As you said earlier, you're not fully involved. You're one or two steps before that. But just your take on what Santiago and both Phil had to say.
I think it depends. I mean, I don't know the answer. I don't know whether the answer is centralized or decentralized. It's not my world. It's not something that I will claim to know the answer to. I'll trust my colleagues here. But I think that's important. It's important to have the infrastructure right, the technology and all the things we've spoken about already. But some of it is a lot simpler than that. So, for example, communication. And I'll give you a story from my own experience where I purchased something at a brand you've definitely bought from before, significant brand in South Africa, bought it on a Saturday, early morning, got an SMS quite quickly, and I was quite impressed. I remember feeling, wow, this is first world, this is really good, I'm impressed. And then got another update and another one. And then things went quiet. And for a week, I didn't hear anything, nothing. And I was thinking, well, surely I had it delivered to the store, so not to my home. And I thought, well, maybe it's at the store already. Maybe I'll take a chance and swing by and pick it up. And they couldn't give me any information either. That's such a simple thing. Now, what happened there is that this is the handover from the e-commerce business to the courier. And then things went quiet, right? So it's that Santiago spoke about this earlier. You've got these two different customers, but both customers are let down in this case. And so, I think that often, definitely part of the answer is all the complex and expensive stuff that we spoke about. Some of it is really simple business basics, and we're not getting that right.
And I mean, maybe I'll bore you with my take a lot experience then for the benefit of those who've not heard it. I mean, two things. You buy a bike for your kid's birthday, 2 days before it's not there. They tell you they sent you some bloody email, which I never read, by the way. I mean, I go to my emails when I sit behind my computer. I don't, as a matter of course, pick up my phone and go, ooh, which emails do I have available? I use WhatsApp. I use other things that many other people use to readily see what's happening. Because if email were that effective, we'd all be coordinating these conversations yesterday via email, right? I was told, oh, no, they sent me an email a week ago to say that the client doesn't have stock. I'm like, okay, I went to Sportsman's Warehouse around the corner from me in Sunningdale, bought a perfectly good bike, and I'll never go back to Takealot to buy a bike again. Right? That's me. They lost me as a customer. But there are other things I can't get from Sportsman's Warehouse or anything close by. One of those cutters, vinyl cutters. So you have a 19-year-old who wants to make T-shirts. You're like, okay, fine, let's get a vinyl cutter. I said to them, listen, I need this by Monday. They tell me, no, it will be delivered by Monday. But then I go, wait, hold on. I'm going to phone JG Electronics, who actually stocks it, because your website tells me that. I'm going to ask them if they have already handed the product over to you in your warehouse. Because if they have, I can surely fetch it today. I've got a number. I can just go through the Montague Gardens. Oh, my word. Do you think the customer services person knew what the heck I was talking about? I said to them, can you find out if this particular product with this code is in your warehouse in Cape Town? because the other dude I spoke to said to me, listen, if it's there, you can collect it. He couldn't. They didn't get back to me. So, communications is absolutely key. And I just want to get both Santiago and Phil's take on
I'm dying
that.
to say something here, exactly, right? So you shouldn't have done a tenth of that, right? Because something. So my job and Santiago's job is to make sure you don't need to read the fine print on the order life cycle of your vinyl cutter, right? Because if you've done that, something has failed, something's gone wrong. And like, no one's perfect. No one's saying we're perfect. We all make mistakes, but today I'm doing better than what I did yesterday. Santiago is chasing every opportunity he can within his control to chase it. So as Kino ordering a bike or a vinyl cutter or a t-shirt or whatever it is, doesn't have to go through that experience, because as you say, next time you order a bike, you ain't going back there. I don't want to chase away a customer from my store because I failed them. That's all. I hate that. So that's a continuous improvement thing that we have to be on all the time, and it's one of the things that draws us and keeps us in supply chain, I think.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and if I might come in there, I mean, I'd also like to say something on that. I mean, and the key to this, I mean, and things go wrong all the time, and I think in the world of business improvement and trying to get better and trying to give that better experience, without giving away too many secrets, I think the key is trying to understand when something is about to go wrong before it actually goes wrong. I mean, when something is moving from Cape Town to Johannesburg, and I have a timestamp of the first time that I've ever seen or had sight of that parcel, I can actually very quickly calculate that if it's not meeting certain milestones in my operation, in my systems, in my BI, whatever it is, and that I can flag things initially, up front. And you're 100% right that communication to the end consumer is so key critical that if you don't mind if it's going to be late on condition that you tell me it's going to be late. You don't mind that I have to perhaps take a day off leave because I have to sign it and I need to give my proof of residence, whatever that is, on condition that I'm able to meet that expectation. So I think on the part of setting the expectations, and if we roll it back to a little bit more of the traditional model, the centralized environment, it's something that we, in our normal environment, try to meet those customer expectations through that kind of communication. But unfortunately, I think we sometimes find that it's the keys are missing or the pieces don't quite align, is exactly when there's integration between where the senders, we need a response from the sender in order to communicate with the receiver, and that breakdown sometimes there is what goes wrong. And there's all sorts of ideas on how to overcome those challenges, but those key critical points in the supply chain, that's where the customer ends up, next time I'm buying a bike, I'm walking across the street instead of buying it on Takealot because something failed somewhere. Yeah.
And Santiago, you'll be testament to this, right? It's amazing how many customers put in details that are incorrect in fields like cell phone number. It's crazy. So again, that's we spoke earlier just about loyalty programs and how you're building that sort of repertoire of information about a customer, and so how your site is set up to hold the data, to validate it, whether it be as simple as a postal code for our last mile vendors, or as simple as what you'd think a cell phone number would be, is really, really important to making sure that when the garbage happens, we're able to communicate effectively, because then it does result in frustration from both customers and, in Santiago's case, both customers' side of the coin.
Can I jump in there quickly? And Phil, you spot on. I worked recently with one of the big retailers locally on exactly that. So they found that exactly what you said, a lot of customers input the wrong information. In fact, it was a little bit of a joke, because then when they looked at their own senior managers and the directors of this company, they themselves had put the wrong information into the system. So how can you expect the rest of us to get it right? But this is a problem, because there's a real cost attached to this, because now you're sending out your fulfillment van and they arrive at the wrong address, and there's a cost attached to that. How you deal with that? From that experience, I'm going to share one or two insights. So clearly, at the top of the business, this this was identified as an issue. It had to be solved. And the first thing they wanted to do was just to force customers to verify their address using some sort of map system, interactive address verification system. And I tested that for them, and it was dire. They would have lost so much money. When I put that system in front of real customers and tested it with them, there was one guy in particular who I remember. He put his order in, came to the address input field, and as he started entering his address, the system didn't find it, didn't recognize it, and he said, "No, this is great. This is a great experience, but they don't deliver to me." They do actually deliver to him. It's just the data. Again, it's what we spoke about earlier. The data just not matching up, and so. What the lesson from that is, you've got to marry these two perspectives, the business and the customer, the consumer. There is almost always a healthy tension between the two. And you can't force the business perspective at all costs, because in the long run, you're actually going to end up losing more money. You've got to marry the two and find the golden midway.
And it's surely also about the value that you offer. If we can, and I promise you, ShopRite and Checkers, they're not paying us for any of this. But I've never bought a loyalty card in my life before, right? Or not signed up for one because of the friction. Because they want to, and especially after COVID, don't ask me to take a blinking pen and fill out a paper. Not going to happen. Or you go to, and with all respect to the Ackermans, I love them as a family, and I do love the business, but those machines that they put up, and every time I try and press a button, there's some mouse thing that doesn't line up with the button. Once again, friction for me. Whereas what the guys at ShopRite did was, my little WhatsApp that I keep talking about, all I needed to do was to send my ID number and something else to a WhatsApp number that they've given me at the back of the card, and Bob's your uncle. It was in my best interest to put in the right details, because I was going to benefit from this up front. So, and maybe it differs with different businesses, but what is the value of actually getting people to double check that detail, as opposed to adding another friction point so that you have all your business imperatives in place? You're going to lose people, because if you're anything like me, I don't have the damn time to go and find my house on a map. Not going to happen, right? I'll go somewhere else. Anybody want to comment on that in terms of getting rid of the friction?
I have a lot of experience with addresses. Let me tell you something that Phil, you'll probably know that from whoever you're using, they're probably kicking and screaming, guys, we need a good address, and to try and do a pin drop. Oh, I am over here. Sometimes it's just better to say behind the KFC. I say to you, behind the KFC, we will find, behind the Pick and Pay, we'll connect to the big tree with the red, whatever. That's sometimes, and those, if I bring this back to South Africa, to a South African context, those are real problems that we deal with every day of our lives, and one mustn't undermine or forget the enormous value that one is able to extract from a local community. All right, so to give you an example, we have a branch in Umtata, and we recruit locally, and we employ locally, and I promise you, I have personally gone down to Umtata. I've personally gotten into a car to try and experience what it's like, for these people to deliver. And when you look at these addresses, the suburb doesn't even exist on Google, all right? But you give it to this guy, he'll read it once, he knows it's this person's aunt, sister's, brother's, niece. He knows exactly, he goes there with immediate, he doesn't even miss a turn. He goes straight there, gets it delivered very efficiently, very correctly. And there's nothing that data, there's nothing that, these things that we can try and implement today anyway, can do to kind of solve those problems, which only local knowledge and only local kind of a taste and a flavor can talk to. And again, it supports, in those instances, the idea of that the local pizzeria has a lot of value to add from that kind of perspective, because they break through those barriers in a way that we from our ivory towers in Johannesburg simply cannot do. There's nothing that we can, even if I tried myself, I could not do it better.
100%.
And it's
And if
an-
I had added in a validation thing in my checkout process, that we would have lost the customer and I wouldn't have passed the business on to you, right? So it's like a lose-lose then. So you've got the right infrastructure on the floor to execute that, and that's not to big data standards because the address wouldn't have come up. And I don't want to lose the customer. So it's that balance, and that I like that term, that healthy friction between both. And because it has to be healthy, I've got to still make it easy for the customer. But I've also got to hand over data that's useful. It might be not useful to me and you, but it's useful to the person who's executing that last mile, in order to make that customer have a really good experience from start to finish.
Absolutely. Now, keeping one's ear to the track, it's just before the train hits you. I mean, that's something I want to get to, and how does one actually do that, right, in your respective businesses? But Johanna, I want to go back to you because I'm very mindful that it's important to include everybody here. And I think digital, as we've all pointed out, it's got such an important role to play. And you were talking about how difficult it can be to integrate into various systems and big businesses, etc. And now I work for a company where we build SH1T for people, right? So we build it. So whether it's Cash Crusaders, etc., we'll build what you need to get your business, your solutions done. And sometimes it's better just to circumnavigate and link in via an API, or use something like a Flowcentric to map the business process from start to end and pick up any problems in between. I mean, are we spending too much time trying to integrate into legacy, or should we not think differently and try and find our way around legacy using some of these things that a lot of us actually use, where we've got GPS, where we've got a lot of capability built into it?
Yeah, again, Kino, I don't think there's one right answer. It's going to differ depending on your context. But you're right. Sometimes we try and over-engineer things. I see this a lot in various contexts, not just in this. So if there's an off-the-shelf solution that can do what you are hoping to build, by all means, you've got to have a really good reason why you're going to hire a team of engineers to build something that already exists, and there are good reasons. But we live in a world and we operate in a world where you're probably running your e-commerce site on something off the shelf. It's highly unlikely that it's custom built. It's Oracle, or it's something, and there are dozens of tools that can probably do exactly what it is that you want it to do. And as you say, via API or whichever way you plug it in, and it just makes so much. So you've got to focus on your engineering resource on the right problems. It's an opportunity cost. You're getting them to work on something that you could have bought off the shelf, and they could have spent that time working on something else that that made more sense.
And as you were right at the beginning, you're saying it's all relative, right? Some things will work off the shelf. Sometimes you've got nuances in your supply chain. You've got, I mean, if I just think of some of these marketplaces where they've got thousands of businesses and they say, you can take, use our database and we'll fulfill all your needs. The promise and what actually happens at the end of the day, two different things, because of all the nuances that you don't take into account. And sometimes it's better to sit down with a Phil or to sit down with a Santiago and say, okay, what are your specific business problems that you have, the biggest headaches, right? And let's see if there is a solution which could be data-driven. Now, I mean, what one uses to extract that data and to map what's happening is dependent on who you're talking to and what the nuances are. But I definitely think there's also value in personalizing things, and especially if you're going to do what Santiago says, which is hyperlocalization, right? A lot of our systems aren't built for hyperlocalization. They're built to be broad-based, one size fits all. And I think the solution lies in between.
Yeah, with personalization, I mean, that's firmly in my area. And again, it depends on data. So you start with, you've got to crawl before you can walk, before you can run, and so on. So you start with very basic personalization, and that's can be, you know somebody's name, so you address them by name, or you make some assumptions based on the pages on your site that they visited. So you can make some assumptions about whether they buy, say, male or female product categories. But then it gets a lot more complex from there. So you start with one-to-many personalization. You've got segments that you talk to as a segment, and eventually you're moving towards one-to-one personalization, where you know that customer as well as the local pizzeria. And when I walk in the door of the pizza place, they already know what I'm going to order and can have it ready for me. They probably know when I'm coming and can have it ready before I'm there. And it's that kind of personalization that you're moving towards. And this is a big topic at the moment. And I have yet to meet somebody in e-commerce management who's not interested in this. But that requires systems, and that requires data. And you've got, start small, start with basic, and start getting the systems in place. It goes back to what we said earlier, because it's that Chinese saying, what is the best time to plant a tree? 20 years ago, but right now is the second best time. Start now getting your systems in place. Start collecting the data now, because in a year or 2 years from now, you'll be ready. And if you didn't do that today, if you didn't lay that foundation today, you can't do anything in a year or two from now.
Absolutely. But I think to your point earlier as well, Johan, and I don't want to make this the Johan and Kino show, but to your point earlier, at the end of the day, you can't just get engineers to build things haphazardly. You need a process to extract why you want to build this, which is why, when I did the opening this morning, Santiago and Phil, I was asking about how much you actually know about your customer. Right. And in your case, Santiago, both your customers. And you do, Johan, a great job of extracting those digital insights. I still believe, though, that there's a lot to be said for the personalized, empathetic data, or what they call in consulting terms, the discovery side of things, right? Where you can then ask yourself, what does this mean? And once you've created a point of view on what it actually means, you can then start ideating. You can then start prototyping, and as the design thinking process works. And I think that is essential. So from Santiago and Phil, I don't want to talk about design thinking as such, because I think the way it's represented by a lot of universities, it's got great flaws and faults, and it sounds great, but the application sometimes is another story. But when it comes to putting your ear to the ground and gaining the empathetic insights from customers, the touch points, the pain points, it was great. How do your respective businesses deal with that? Phil?
Maybe I can go. I'm certainly not an expert in that side of our business, but what I can tell you is we take feedback very seriously. Now, you'll often get, Santiago will know, a customer in a store who will complain whether it's a perfect delivery or whether it's the worst one in the world. And of course, that person will also always have a worst delivery, right? But the feedback that we get in phrases of our customer service database, in whatever it is, gets taken to heart, and that's not. We know that's not the norm. So we know our numbers are good enough to know that that's not the norm. But if that's one customer that's taken time to give us feedback, we're taking that seriously. I mean, we're using that to be on our ever better journey. That may be anything from communication. We'll then speak to our vendor to make sure, hey, what broke down in that step? Why didn't we send that SMS or that update as we went along? And sometimes there's a really good reason, and sometimes there isn't. As well as then from a product perspective. So I don't want return rates that we see around the world. So is our sizing right? And that information gets all the way back to buyers at group head office sort of locations. So the variedness of what we get back and how we deal with it, we definitely bucket into certain buckets. So today I know what my NPS score was for last week. I know how many queries we got through. I know I had 193 disappointed customers last week. Like, that's the detail that I'm in, right? And I can tell you that broken down between delivery, order issues, or website issues. And we're able to take that data and then see what we can control in that, because there are going to be some exceptions. I'm not going to spend a hell of a lot of time on exceptions. I'm going to see if there's a pattern, and absolutely, as I say, work towards that ever better journey where tomorrow will be better.
Cool. Santiago?
Yeah, and from our point of view, I mean, I'm very close to what Philip's also saying. That kind of, I mean, it's. I think the first hurdle that one needs to overcome is actually getting the feedback and soliciting the feedback from the customers. You might actually have very disgruntled customers, but they don't go onto your website to lodge a complaint. They don't go onto Facebook to lodge a complaint. And if you're not actually tapping into that unhappiness and dealing with it, you'll never actually be able to physically improve the service. So the simple things that we would do is, just send an SMS, rate our service 1 to 5. If you're rating it 1, we'll actually phone you and say, please explain what happened. We'll try again, give us that feedback. And we kind of like compartmentalize that data into quantitative and qualitative data. Certain things are very easy to deal with. I missed the flight, therefore I was late. I was waiting for my wedding ring. I got married without my wedding ring. It's not a very difficult thing to understand. We messed it up. We need to fix it. But other things, and we've had strange ones, and I'll like the one time that sticks out for me is that one of our drivers tried to get into one of the areas to deliver. There was a dog involved. The dog started barking, going nuts. We weren't late with the delivery. The lady that we were delivering to got upset because the dog was upset, and we ended up getting a complaint. I mean, that's a very qualitative, localized, emotive type of bad customer experience. And those are much more difficult to deal with than the real hard quantity. Oh, well, you know what? We missed the flight. Let's make sure that 99.99% of the time we don't miss the flight. I mean, that's the simple part. And to talk to your point is that you're really going to reach into the hearts and the minds of the consumer. I mean, we are emotional creatures that rationalize. I mean, that's what we are. If you're emotionally in a bad state, even if the delivery was perfect, okay, that experience was a poor one. I mean, if you had attached yourself to that bicycle that you bought, for your son, and it's that emotional letdown that even if there's a completely legitimate reason as to why it occurred, if you're not tapping into that and actually dealing with that side of it, you'll never actually win the consumer over. You'll lose their confidence. The repeat business will probably start. Phil's and say, well, I'm losing customers because you're upsetting my customers. And that kind of a balance between the quantitative, one has to almost sift through it slowly. And but you can also get yourself into a problem when you go into analysis paralysis. You've got so much data, you actually don't know what to do with it. Exactly what Johan was saying. How do you read it? How do you interpret it? What do you physically do with it? It's such an interesting concept where we could spend all day talking about it. But I mean, that's just in a nutshell what we try to do here at RAM.
This is such a fruitful discussion, actually. So, Johan, for systems that are repetitive, you can pick up patterns. You can, generally speaking, use artificial intelligence for it, right? So as a data scientist, I'd be very keen to know from your side the role that AI could potentially play in fulfillment. We can use predictive analysis when it comes to, and we've got some good South African companies that we can talk about, one in particular, that you do predictive maintenance. You also make sure that your productivity is essential because, it's repetitive. I mean, it's something that you can use. The algorithms will be able to give you a bit of an outcome which is positive. Do you think that artificial intelligence could be used in the fulfillment process at all in the future? Absolutely. And I think, I don't know, Santiago, you better place to comment on this. I would imagine it's already there. I would imagine that it's already deployed. AI is already being used. And Santiago spoke about that, the ability to predict where things are going to go wrong. So that's AI playing a role there. And that's actually quite basic predictive, models that can be used there, that you can train over time. But, I think, often we look at these big buzzwords, like AI and personalization and some of the stuff we spoke about. And actually, we're not there yet. We need to fix the basics.
And my impression is with a lot of e-commerce businesses in South Africa right now, that's where we are. It's good to start thinking about AI. It's good to start thinking about personalization. It's good to start thinking about all these grand things that you can do in a year or 2 or 3 from now. But please, let's fix the basics because we're not there yet.
Absolutely, because as you said earlier, dirt in, dirt out, or rubbish in, rubbish out. If you don't annotate your data correctly, you're not going to get the results that you're looking for. But if it is part of your medium to long-term plan, someone's going to start working on it, right? It's not, I mean, you can't, at the end of the day, just annotating your data correctly. If your strategy says that we are going to be a company that, part of our tool set and our execution is going to be using analytics, predictive analytics in this particular supply chain, you don't just switch it on the day after you made the decision. Someone has to start with the data sets, the annotation, and at the end of the day, the implementation of that particular algorithm. And I mean, we're talking over people's heads now, but at the end of the day, that is essential. Santiago, AI in your system?
No, I mean, without a shadow of a doubt. I mean, let me just give you a simple example, just literally off the top of my head, following on what I was just saying. If I know, right, that the last time I delivered to you, your dog barked at me, right, and there was a complaint, and I have to go deliver that bike next week to you, and I can make use of that data to let my courier know, Mr. Courier, please just watch out. There's a dog involved here. Just he barks a lot. Just take that personal touch. And if we are able to train our people to react and adapt to that kind of information, I'm then using a very simplistic example. It can get very, very complex, and we can do phenomenal things, and the things we talk about are very romantic. But that simplistic touch is something that it just adds that flavor, that secret sauce, if I might say that, and that's what gets the consumers, in our experience. I mean, that's what we experience through our customers and our customers' customers. That kind of AI is incredibly powerful on so many levels. I mean, it's and Johan, I echo exactly what you're saying. I mean, we have to get the basics right. You can't do this overnight. It is a series of steps, one on top of the other. How you start to mine the data, how you start to work through the data. Personally, I'm deeply involved with data analytics within RAM, and it is without the right data, with the right interpretation of the data, we are wasting our time. So to get those basics right, those foundational pillars right, is the key to success. Otherwise, it's just one bad Excel spreadsheet.
That's true. We have enough of those floating around, don't we? Phil?
I don't use a lot. So one of the things that I didn't have the chance to earlier to speak about was, we did actually. We spoke about knowing our supply chain, understanding how it works, what the levers are, what your systems look like. So we know we're not in that game. We know we're not mature enough in our evolution to be playing in that game. And there's some really smart guys out there, including people who are our vendors, including people who aren't, who come to us with amazingly bright things that can be done. It's not who we are now. And that's okay. We're okay with that. As long as we're satisfying our customer. I'm sure there'll be lots of people who would phone me next week and say, "Oh, I hear you haven't got anything. This is what I do," and that's fine. It's amazing to hear what guys do. It is. You just got to find the benefit of what it'll add to you. How do we quantify that? Which is always a hard thing to do, and you've got to have the strategy to want to chase that. Which is why I say we're not there yet, and I don't know if we will be.
Well, that's fine.
We'll have to see what comes, but knowing who you are, what you're wanting to achieve, I think is very important there. In trying, be clear on what you're trying to solve.
Indeed. Okay. Well, it is 22. It's when we're supposed to wrap. So a couple of seconds from everybody. Let's start with you, Johan, and then Santiago. By the way, you spoke about your secret sauce. I can already see Santiago's pizza parlor. As a side hustle. But anyway, Johan, let's start with you.
In summary, I think that you've got to look at two things when you talk about logistics and fulfillment. The one is the infrastructure and the wheels, like Santiago calls it, so the vans going out and delivering it. But the other aspect of it is often forgotten, I see, and that is the just what your strategy is, what your proposition is, and how you're communicating that to your customers, and that you are communicating it to your customers. And that I've said that it's a big passion killer in South Africa especially, and how you're dealing with that anxiety. How are you putting their minds at ease before they buy from you, because they do have anxieties about it.
Yeah, Johan, thank you so much for that. John Fantunda from AWA Digital. Santiago?
I think it's, it all hinges. I mean, things sound very romantic when we talk and we strategize and we conceptualize these things. But I think from our point of view is that one thing that must never be undermined or forgotten is the collaboration that needs to happen between the senders, the wheels, I call the walls, the wheels, and the receivers. I mean, we find that when the different parties involved physically sit down and we collaborate, what are we trying to achieve? Exactly like you're saying, what is the strategy? What are your needs? In this case, what are Phil's needs? Like what is the problem that we're solving for? What is X? Solve for X. What is X? And when we put those minds together, and that's what we talk about our customers actually as partners. We don't talk about them as guys. Like when we sit down and we collaborate and we figure things out, that's when the magic happens. And I urge all businesses, I mean, that's to collaborate, because that's when the problems get solved, and that's when the pieces of magic actually occur.
Mr. Cotterdon, Phil.
It's been so interesting for me to have so many different facets of this particular panel. It's been really interesting. I think the value that I've been able to add from just showing what can be controlled in your four walls, and the bits that you connect into your vendors either side of it is a really important journey that I've had the pleasure of taking a few supply chains through in my life. So to have that consistency of performance here behind these walls, literally behind these walls, to make sure that what I hand over to the Santiagos of the world with the information from the Johans of the world equals a happy customer, and that happy customer will change tomorrow. And we must all be aware of that. We must be curious enough to know what that may be, have trialed it enough to be able to have the confidence to implement it tomorrow, and not rest on your laurels. I love the ever better journey that we're able to take here. And I'm confident we're well placed to take it, and staying close to your customer. Got to stay close, front of mind, as I say. Maybe not the last thing at night, but definitely the first thing in the morning.
There we go. Well, yeah, it depends who the customer is. Gentlemen, thank you very much. And no, we didn't all get our wallpaper at the same place, but I'm going to hand you over to Adam. Thank you very much for that. What an insightful discussion, gentlemen. Thank you for taking out the time. I know you guys run hectic businesses, so much appreciated.
Thank you, Kino. And a big thank you to our panelists, Johan, Santiago, and Phil. Thank you very much.